What if the person who hurt you the most was also the one who unknowingly prepared you for your strongest season? I know that sounds almost offensive to say out loud, because when you were in it, when you were staring at your phone waiting for a message that never came, when you felt the warmth turn into distance overnight, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like rejection. It felt like confusion. It felt like you weren't enough. But stay with me, because this isn't about romanticizing their behavior. This is about reclaiming your power. This is about understanding that sometimes the people who cannot love you properly still shape you profoundly. And the truth is, an avoidant doesn't just leave you with pain. They leave you with transformation. The first 6 gifts they unknowingly give you are not wrapped in kindness. They're wrapped in silence, in withdrawal, in emotional walls. But if you survived it, you already carry these gifts inside you. You just haven't named them yet. The first gift they unknowingly give you is emotional self-reliance. In the beginning, you leaned in, you reassured, you over-explained, you tried to create safety for both of you. When they pulled back, your instinct might have been to chase closeness, to fix, to soothe, to bridge the gap. And every time they created distance, it triggered something deep inside you. Maybe anxiety, maybe fear, maybe the need to prove your worth. But here's what slowly started happening beneath the surface. You began sitting with feelings you used to outsource. You began processing your own spirals instead of always reaching outward. Their emotional unavailability forced you into a space of self-confrontation. You had to learn how to calm your own nervous system when they wouldn't. You had to learn how to reassure yourself when they stayed silent. And that's not small, that's massive. Emotional self-reliance isn't coldness. It's not detachment. It's the ability to say, I can feel this wave and not drown in it. Before them, maybe you depended on consistency from someone else to feel stable. After them, you started building that stability inside. You started realizing that you could survive unanswered messages. You could survive distance. You could survive not knowing. That strength didn't come from nowhere. It was forged in the space they refused to fill. And now, whether you see it or not, you're not the same person who once panicked at the first sign of withdrawal. You've learned to sit with discomfort. You've learned to self-soothe. You've learned that your emotional world cannot depend entirely on someone else's availability. That's a gift they didn't intend to give you, but it's yours now. The second gift they unknowingly give you is clarity about what you truly deserve. Silence is a brutal teacher. Inconsistency is a mirror you can't ignore forever. When someone is hot and then cold, present and then distant, affectionate and then detached, it forces you to confront a hard question. Is this enough for me? In the beginning, you might have justified it. You told yourself they were stressed, overwhelmed, scared, independent. You tried to shrink your needs to fit their comfort zone, but over time, something shifted. Their patterns became undeniable, and that's when clarity began to rise. You started seeing the difference between potential and reality. You started noticing how effort feels when it's mutual versus when it's one-sided. You began recognizing that love isn't supposed to feel like guessing. It isn't supposed to feel like earning crumbs. You saw how much emotional labor you were carrying, and maybe for the first time, you asked yourself, why am I fighting so hard to be chosen? That question alone is powerful, because clarity doesn't just show you what they are, it shows you what you will no longer tolerate. You learn that consistency is not too much to ask for, that reassurance is not clingy, that emotional presence is not unrealistic. Their inability to meet you didn't lower your value, it revealed your standards. And once you see clearly, you can't unsee it. Even if part of you still misses them, another part of you knows the truth. You deserve stability. You deserve communication. You deserve someone who doesn't treat intimacy like a threat. That clarity was born from confusion, but it's a gift you will carry into every connection from now on. The third gift they unknowingly give you is stronger boundaries. When someone repeatedly crosses your emotional comfort line, you eventually reach a breaking point. At first, you may have overextended. You answered every late-night message. You accepted last-minute plans. You tolerated emotional shutdowns without accountability. You told yourself patience equals love. But patience without boundaries becomes self-abandonment, and being involved with an avoidant often brings you face-to-face with that reality. Their withdrawal forces you to ask, how much am I willing to accept? Their inconsistency makes you confront where you've been overgiving. Every time they disappeared and came back as if nothing happened, something inside you reacted. Maybe you swallowed it at first. Maybe you stayed quiet to keep the peace. But emotions don't disappear just because they're ignored. Eventually you felt it. The resentment, the exhaustion, the realization that your needs were being sidelined, and that's where boundaries are born. Not from anger, but from self-respect. You began understanding that boundaries aren't ultimatums. They are standards. They are the lines that say, I can love you, but I will not lose myself. Being with someone emotionally unavailable forces you to define what is acceptable and what is not. It pushes you to decide that disappearing without communication is not okay. That emotional shutdowns without effort to reconnect are not sustainable. That you will not carry the entire relationship on your back. Those boundaries may have come late. They may have been messy. But they are stronger now because they were built from lived experience. And once you develop real boundaries, you don't easily go back to tolerating chaos. The fourth gift they unknowingly give you is the ability to detach in a healthy way. Avoidants are often masters of emotional distance. They can switch off quickly. They can create space without appearing shaken. When you're on the receiving end of that, it hurts deeply. It feels like you cared more. It feels like you were left holding everything. But over time, something surprising happens. You begin to mirror a healthier version of detachment. Not the cold kind, not the suppress everything kind, but the kind that says, I can care without clinging. You start learning that you cannot force someone to open up. You cannot convince someone to value closeness. You cannot love someone into emotional availability. That realization is painful, but it's freeing. Because it shifts your energy from chasing to observing, from convincing to evaluating. You stop trying to decode every mixed signal. You stop overanalyzing every delay. You begin saying, if they want to show up, they will. And if they don't, I will survive. That shift is powerful. It transforms anxiety into awareness. It transforms desperation into discernment. You become less reactive. You start watching actions instead of getting hypnotized by words. And that detachment doesn't make you heartless. It makes you balanced. It allows you to step back when something feels off instead of spiraling forward. You learned that loving someone does not require abandoning yourself. And once you master that kind of detachment, you are no longer easily destabilized by emotional inconsistency. The fifth gift they unknowingly give you is an awakening of your self-worth. This one doesn't happen overnight. It usually happens after repeated disappointment, after giving and realizing the energy isn't matched. There comes a moment, quiet but powerful, where you see the imbalance clearly. You recognize how much you adjusted, how much you overextended, how often you minimized your needs to keep the connection alive, and suddenly it hits you. You were overgiving to someone underinvesting. That awareness can sting. It can bring regret. It can bring embarrassment, but it also brings awakening because you start asking yourself why you believed you had to earn love, why you tolerated emotional breadcrumbs, why you fought so hard for someone who met you halfway at best. And in asking those questions, you begin reclaiming something vital. You begin rebuilding your self-worth from the inside. You start understanding that your depth is not a flaw. Your emotional capacity is not too much. Your desire for closeness is not weakness. The problem was never that you felt deeply. The problem was that you were pouring that depth into someone who feared it. And once that realization settles in, your standards rise naturally. You no longer chase validation the same way. You no longer shrink to make someone comfortable. You no longer beg for consistency. Your energy changes. There's a quiet confidence that begins to form. Not loud, not arrogant, just steady. You start realizing that someone's inability to meet you does not reduce your value. It reveals their limitations. And that shift changes everything. Because when self-worth is awakened through experience, it is far stronger than self-worth built only on words. So no, the experience didn't feel like a gift. It felt like heartbreak. It felt like confusion. It felt like questioning yourself. But look at who you're becoming. More self-reliant, clearer about your standards, stronger in your boundaries, balanced in your detachment, rooted in your self-worth. These are not small transformations. These are life-altering upgrades. And whether they realize it or not, the avoidant who once made you doubt yourself also activated your growth. And this is only 5 of the 6 gifts. And this is only 5 of the 6 gifts. The 6th gift they unknowingly give you is emotional maturity. Not the kind that comes from reading about relationships, not the kind that sounds good in theory, the kind that is carved into you through experience. Being involved with someone who struggles with closeness forces you to confront your own patterns. It forces you to look at why you stayed when things felt unstable. It forces you to examine your attachment, your fears, your triggers. You had to sit with uncomfortable truths about yourself. You had to ask why inconsistency felt intoxicating instead of alarming, why unpredictability sometimes felt like passion, why you confused intensity with intimacy. And that level of self-reflection is maturity. Emotional maturity is recognizing your part without taking responsibility for someone else's inability to show up. It's understanding that you can love deeply and still walk away when your needs are unmet. It's learning to communicate clearly instead of hinting. It's choosing self-respect over fantasy. They may still be running from vulnerability, but you are no longer running from yourself. You've faced your fear of abandonment. You've faced your fear of being alone. You've faced the discomfort of letting go. That is growth at a level many never reach. And even if you didn't want the lesson, it expanded you. It stretched you. It deepened you. You are more emotionally aware now than you were before them. And that awareness will shape every future connection in a healthier way. Now here's the paradox that might be hard to swallow. They didn't mean to help you. Avoidants don't wake up thinking about how to transform you. Most of the time, they are simply protecting themselves, protecting their independence, protecting their emotional walls, protecting their fear of being engulfed or exposed. Their distance is rarely about strategy, it's about survival. And in protecting themselves, they triggered something in you. They triggered your insecurities, your longing, your desire to prove your worth. But once the dust settles, once the emotional storm calms down, you begin to see something clearly. Their behavior was never a reflection of your inadequacy. It was a reflection of their limits. And when you truly absorb that, something shifts inside you. You stop personalizing everything. You stop internalizing their withdrawal as proof that you are too much or not enough. You begin separating your identity from their reactions. That separation is freeing. Because for so long, maybe you carried the silent question of what did I do wrong? And now you understand that sometimes you did nothing wrong. Sometimes you were simply asking for depth from someone who fears drowning in it. That realization doesn't erase the hurt, but it reframes it. And reframing pain is powerful. It turns you from victim into observer, from confused into aware, from chasing answers to accepting truth. Let's talk about the pain phase for a moment, because before the growth came the withdrawal. Loving an avoidant often feels like detox. When they are close, it feels electric. When they are present, it feels intense. And when they pull away, it feels like something vital was ripped out of you. Your mind races. You replay conversations. You search for clues. You analyze tone, timing, energy shifts. You crave that reassurance they once gave so effortlessly. And when it disappears, it feels like a drop from a high place. That cycle can become addictive. The unpredictability creates spikes of hope, followed by crashes of doubt. And your nervous system gets hooked on trying to restore the connection. But here's the hidden transformation in that painful cycle. You eventually grow tired, tired of guessing, tired of chasing, tired of feeling unstable. And that exhaustion becomes a turning point, because exhaustion can either break you or wake you up. In your case, it began waking you up. You started realizing that love should not feel like constant recovery. It should not feel like survival mode. It should not feel like walking on emotional eggshells. That realization didn't come in one dramatic moment. It came in small, quiet shifts. A text you didn't send, a boundary you held, a moment you chose silence instead of pursuit. Those small shifts add up, and suddenly, the addiction loses its grip. The highs don't feel as intoxicating. The lows don't feel as devastating. You begin stabilizing within yourself, and that stabilization is strength. There was also a breaking point. There's always a breaking point. It may not have looked dramatic from the outside. Maybe it was just a quiet realization while lying in bed. Maybe it was the moment you saw the same pattern repeat again. Maybe it was the day you realized you were more anxious than happy, but something inside you snapped into clarity, not anger, not revenge, just clarity. You stopped chasing answers that weren't coming. You stopped over-explaining your needs. You stopped trying to decode someone who wasn't trying to be understood. That moment is powerful because it marks the shift from emotional dependence to emotional autonomy. You realized you cannot force someone to meet you where they refuse to stand. And instead of collapsing, you stood up, maybe slowly, maybe shakily, but you stood. And that internal shift changes the entire dynamic, because once you stop chasing, the power balance changes. Not as a game, not as manipulation, but as self-preservation. You no longer operate from fear of losing them. You begin operating from fear of losing yourself. And that is a completely different energy. Their silence, as painful as it was, built something solid inside you. Every unanswered message taught you patience with yourself. Every canceled plan taught you to stop over-prioritizing someone who under-prioritized you. Every emotional shutdown taught you that you cannot rescue someone from their own walls. And slowly, you began redirecting that energy inward. Instead of waiting, you started building. Instead of overthinking, you started growing. Maybe you poured into your goals. Maybe you deepened friendships. Maybe you rediscovered parts of yourself that had been overshadowed by the relationship. That redirection is not accidental, it's evolution. When you stop investing all your emotional energy into someone who cannot receive it fully, you suddenly have space. Space to expand, space to breathe, space to become. And in that space, your confidence grows quietly, not loud, not showy, just steady. You realize you are capable of standing alone. You realize your happiness cannot hinge on someone's emotional availability, and that realization is liberating. Now imagine this. If they ever circle back, if they ever reappear with curiosity or nostalgia, they will not meet the same version of you. They will meet someone who has grown, someone who sees patterns clearly, someone who values peace more than intensity, someone who no longer confuses emotional distance with mystery. You are not hardened. You are refined. You are not closed. You are discerning, and that discernment is the ultimate gift because it protects you without isolating you. It allows you to love again, but differently, healthier, slower, more aware. You no longer ignore red flags because chemistry feels strong. You no longer equate inconsistency with excitement. You understand that real intimacy feels safe, not chaotic. The ultimate gift, the one that ties all six together, is emotional freedom. You are no longer trapped in the loop of trying to win someone over. You are no longer measuring your worth by someone's responsiveness. You are no longer shrinking or stretching yourself to fit inside someone's comfort zone. You are free to be exactly who you are, deep, emotional, intense, thoughtful. And instead of seeing those traits as liabilities, you now see them as strengths. Because the right person will not run from your depth. They will meet it. They will appreciate it, they will reciprocate it. So when you look back, don't just see the hurt, see the evolution, see the boundaries that formed, see the clarity that sharpened, see the self-worth that awakened, see the emotional maturity that expanded, see the independence that strengthened, see the freedom that settled in your chest. They may never understand the role they played in your transformation, they may never acknowledge the growth they triggered, but you will, and that's enough. Because in the end, they were not your destination. They were your lesson. And you didn't lose, you evolved. And you didn't lose, you evolved. But evolution doesn't end the moment you understand the lesson. That's where the real integration begins. Because knowing you grew is one thing. Living from that growth every single day is another. After everything, there's a quiet period, a space where you're no longer chasing them, but you're also not fully sure who you are without the emotional roller coaster. That space can feel empty at first. When the intensity fades, when the obsession softens, when you stop checking their activity or replaying old conversations, there's silence. And in that silence, you meet yourself again. This is where you begin rebuilding your identity without them as the emotional center. When you were caught in the cycle, so much of your mental energy revolved around decoding them. What are they feeling? Why did they pull away? Are they thinking about me? But now the focus shifts. Now the questions become, what do I want? What feels safe to me? What kind of love aligns with who I am becoming? That shift is powerful. It moves you from reaction to intention, from survival mode to conscious choice. And here's something most people don't talk about. When you detach from an avoidant dynamic, you also detach from a version of yourself that tolerated emotional uncertainty. And you start noticing how calm feels different. You start realizing that peace isn't boring, it's stabilizing. You begin craving consistency instead of chaos. And that craving is not weakness, it's alignment. There was a time when unpredictability felt magnetic, when mystery felt attractive, when emotional unavailability triggered your desire to prove yourself. But now you see the pattern. You see how your nervous system was activated, not in a healthy way, but in a familiar way. You understand that sometimes what feels intense isn't love, it's old wounds meeting each other. And that awareness changes who you're drawn to next. You start becoming more observant. You listen closely when someone speaks about vulnerability. You watch how they handle conflict. You notice if their words match their actions. You no longer ignore subtle signs of withdrawal. You no longer over-justify behavior that makes you anxious. Instead of diving headfirst into chemistry, you move with discernment, slowly, intentionally. That's not fear, that's growth. And with growth comes a power shift. Not power over them, power within yourself. There was a time when the thought of losing them felt unbearable, when the idea of them moving on made your chest tighten, when you imagined them forgetting you and it felt like erasure. But now something has changed. The fear isn't as sharp, the grip isn't as tight. The idea of them choosing someone else doesn't shatter you the same way, because you finally understand that someone's inability to choose you consistently is not a measure of your worth. That realization restores your power. You no longer feel the urge to prove what they missed. You no longer fantasize about them realizing your value, because your value is no longer dependent on their recognition. It exists with or without their awareness. And when you truly embody that, something magnetic happens. Your energy shifts. You carry yourself differently. You don't seek validation the same way. You don't overextend to secure connection. You show up as yourself and allow others to rise to meet you or fall away. And here's the truth that might sting a little. Sometimes avoidants do come back. Sometimes they circle around when they sense your detachment, when they feel the emotional access closing, when they realize the familiar source of depth and validation is no longer reaching toward them. But if that moment happens, it will test everything you've learned, because the old version of you might want to rush back in, might want to believe this time is different, might want to finally receive the consistency you waited for, but the evolved version of you pauses. The evolved version of you asks, has anything truly changed? Are actions different? Is vulnerability being practiced, not just promised? Is effort consistent, not occasional? Growth means you no longer accept temporary emotional availability as transformation. You no longer confuse regret with readiness. You understand that change requires sustained behavior, not just words spoken in moments of loneliness. And if they haven't changed, you will feel it. Your body will know. Your intuition will speak louder than your longing. And for the first time, you will trust yourself enough to walk away again, not from pain, but from misalignment. That is emotional sovereignty. There's also something else that begins happening as you move forward. You stop romanticizing the struggle. You stop telling yourself that love requires suffering. You stop equating emotional highs and lows with passion. Instead, you begin redefining what intimacy actually means. Intimacy becomes safety. It becomes emotional transparency. It becomes consistency. It becomes mutual effort. You start desiring someone who leans in when things get hard, not someone who disappears, someone who communicates discomfort instead of withdrawing into silence, someone who sees closeness as connection, not confinement. And because you've experienced the opposite, you recognize the difference instantly. That's another layer of the gift. Contrast creates clarity. Without the confusion, you wouldn't recognize stability as quickly. Without the inconsistency, you wouldn't appreciate reliability the same way. Without the emotional distance, you wouldn't value emotional presence so deeply. Your standards aren't higher because you're bitter. They're higher because you're aware, and awareness protects you. There will still be moments of nostalgia. That's normal. You might remember the good parts, the laughter, the chemistry, the connection that felt rare. Healing doesn't erase memories, it reframes them. You can appreciate what was real without ignoring what was missing. You can acknowledge the connection without denying the incompatibility. That balance is maturity. And as you continue integrating these lessons, you'll notice something subtle but profound. You no longer feel triggered by the same behaviors. If someone takes space, you don't immediately spiral. If someone is inconsistent, You don't chase, you observe, you assess, you respond instead of react. That emotional regulation is power. You've moved from anxious urgency to grounded awareness, from needing reassurance to embodying security, from chasing clarity to demanding it up front. And the most beautiful part, you didn't become cold. You didn't shut down your heart. You didn't turn avoidant yourself. You became conscious. You learned how to love without losing yourself. You learned how to care without clinging. You learned how to detach without bitterness. That is rare. So if you ever question whether the experience meant anything, remember this. It expanded you. It strengthened you. It refined you. The pain carved out space for deeper understanding. The confusion forced you into self-discovery. The rejection redirected you towards self-worth. They unknowingly gave you 6 gifts: emotional self-reliance, clarity about your standards, stronger boundaries, healthy detachment, awakened self-worth, and emotional maturity. But beyond those 6, they gave you something even greater. They gave you a confrontation with yourself. And instead of collapsing under it, you rose. You are no longer the person who waits by the phone hoping for consistency. You are the person who chooses environments that reflect it. You are no longer trying to earn love. You are aligning with it. You are no longer afraid of losing someone who cannot meet you. You are afraid of losing yourself, and that fear keeps you anchored. One day, you'll look back at this chapter and it won't sting. It will feel like a turning point. The moment you stopped begging for crumbs and started building your own table. The moment you realized that love should add to your peace, not compete with it. The moment you understood that someone else's emotional limitations are not your burden to fix. And when real love arrives, steady, present, emotionally available, you will receive it differently. You won't grip it out of fear. You won't overanalyze it. You'll allow it, because you'll finally believe you deserve it without having to fight for it. That's the final integration, not just surviving the avoidant, not just learning the lesson, but embodying the growth so deeply that your future reflects it. You didn't just get through it. You transformed because of it. And that transformation is something no one can take away from you. But let's go even deeper, because transformation isn't just about how you handle the next relationship, it's about how you carry yourself in every area of your life after surviving something that once destabilized you. When you've loved someone who struggled with closeness, you don't just learn about romance, you learn about resilience, you learn about patience, you learn about emotional endurance. And those qualities don't disappear when the relationship ends. They integrate into who you are becoming. There's a quiet confidence that starts forming inside you now. It's not loud, it's not performative, it doesn't need to announce itself. It's the kind of confidence that comes from surviving emotional confusion and coming out clearer. It's the kind that says, I felt uncertainty before and I didn't break. I felt ignored before and I didn't disappear. I felt rejected before and I still stand whole. That internal steadiness changes how you move through the world. You stop seeking constant reassurance from friends. You stop needing to retell the story to validate your pain. You've already validated it within yourself. You know what happened. You know what you felt. And you no longer need someone else to confirm that it mattered. That's growth. Because closure doesn't always come from conversations. Sometimes it comes from acceptance. And acceptance is powerful. Acceptance doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It means you understand it. You see the dynamic clearly. You recognize how 2 nervous systems interacted, how your desire for closeness met their fear of it, how your attempts to connect collided with their instinct to retreat. It wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It was patterned. And once you see the pattern, you stop taking it personally. That's where peace begins. And here's something even more profound. The experience has likely softened you in unexpected ways. Yes, it made you stronger. Yes, it sharpened your boundaries, but it also made you more compassionate, not just toward them, but toward yourself. You understand now that people operate from wounds, that emotional avoidance isn't cruelty, it's protection, that not everyone who pulls away is trying to hurt you. Some are simply afraid, and that understanding prevents you from becoming hardened. You don't need to villainize them to move forward. You can acknowledge that they were limited without labeling them evil. That emotional nuance is maturity. It means you can hold 2 truths at once. They hurt you, and they were protecting themselves. They couldn't meet you, and that doesn't make you unworthy. Holding complexity without collapsing into resentment is a sign of deep growth. Now let's talk about the future version of you, the one who will sit across from someone emotionally available, the one who will experience consistency without anxiety, the one who will feel chosen without confusion. That version of you exists because of what you endured. Without the contrast, you might not recognize healthy love. Without the lessons, you might repeat the cycle unconsciously. But now you're aware. When someone communicates clearly, you won't mistrust it. When someone stays present during conflict, you won't brace for disappearance. When someone reassures you without being asked, you won't question their motives. You'll receive it calmly because you no longer equate stability with boredom. That's the final shift. You stop mistaking chaos for chemistry. And here's another truth that might resonate deeply. The avoidant dynamic likely activated something old inside you. Maybe it mirrored early experiences of emotional inconsistency. Maybe it tapped into a childhood feeling of needing to earn love. Maybe it awakened a fear of abandonment you thought you had already healed. And while that activation was painful, it also exposed what still needed attention. Sometimes people enter our lives not to stay, but to reveal unresolved parts of us. And when those parts are revealed, we have a choice. We can ignore them and repeat the cycle, or we can face them and break it. You chose to face it. You sat with discomfort. You questioned your patterns. You examined why you tolerated what you did. You reflected instead of projecting. That inner work is not easy. It's not glamorous. It's quiet and often lonely, but it rewires you from the inside out. And because of that, you are no longer unconsciously attracted to emotional unavailability in the same way. You still might feel chemistry. You're human. But now chemistry isn't enough. Now you require alignment. Now you require emotional reciprocity. Now you require presence. That shift protects your future. There's also something empowering about realizing you survived something you once thought would destroy you. Remember those nights when the silence felt unbearable? When the distance felt suffocating, when the uncertainty consumed your thoughts. You survived those nights. You woke up. You kept functioning. You kept moving. Even when it felt heavy, you carried yourself forward. That resilience is part of you now. And resilience isn't just about enduring pain. It's about adapting. It's about learning. It's about emerging wiser. You are wiser now. You recognize red flags faster. You trust your intuition more. You don't ignore your body when it signals anxiety, you listen. That self-trust is everything. Because at the core of every avoidant dynamic is a moment where you doubted yourself. You questioned your needs. You wondered if you were too much, too emotional, too intense, too demanding. And now you know the truth. You weren't too much. You were simply asking the wrong person. And that realization restores dignity. You begin honoring your depth instead of apologizing for it. You stop shrinking your expectations to maintain connection. You understand that your capacity for intimacy is a strength, not a liability. And when someone cannot handle that depth, it says more about their limits than your value. That mindset transforms how you date, how you choose, how you walk away. Walking away no longer feels like failure. It feels like alignment. It feels like self-respect. It feels like protecting your peace. And peace becomes your priority now. Not intensity, not obsession, not validation. Peace. There's something incredibly attractive about someone who prioritizes peace. It radiates stability. It signals emotional security. And ironically, the very growth triggered by an avoidant makes you more magnetic to healthy partners. Because grounded energy attracts grounded energy. You become the calm in the room. You become the person who doesn't panic at minor conflict, who doesn't need constant reassurance, who communicates directly, who listens deeply, who responds thoughtfully. That emotional steadiness is rare, and it's earned. The final layer of this transformation is gratitude, not necessarily for the pain itself, but for who you became through it. Gratitude for the self-awareness, gratitude for the strengthened boundaries, gratitude for the emotional intelligence, gratitude for the clarity that now guides your choices. You may never thank them directly, you don't need to, but internally you can acknowledge that the chapter served a purpose. It redirected you, it refined you, it awakened you, and now you step forward differently. Not guarded, but discerning. Not bitter, but wise. Not fearful, but grounded. You carry your heart with strength now. You know what it can survive, you know what it deserves, and you no longer confuse longing with love. So, as this chapter fully closes, remember this: they were part of your path, not the destination. They were a catalyst, not the conclusion. The gifts they unknowingly gave you are woven into your character now, into your standards, into your self-worth, into your future. You didn't just heal. You transformed, integrated, matured, and evolved beyond the version of yourself who once waited for emotional crumbs. And the next time love enters your life, it won't find someone desperate to be chosen. It will find someone who already chose themselves,